Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
You silence the doubters. You get the best tools. You work with the right people. You look to the future and bust through.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today we have an amazing returning guest. We have Brent VanParys. How are you?
I am great, Tracy. It's a sunny day, blue sky. How can you not be?
I know, spring is in the air. That's the best feeling. I love it. And you know what? The whole farming world wakes up at this time of year. So I can just feel the energy in our industry, in life in general. So very excited to have you on the show, and we are going to be chatting about how transition planning works. So welcome back. We're so happy to have you. And before we dive in, Brent is the partner with BDO Canada, and he leads their business transition services team. So Brent, you are the perfect guy to be chatting about transition planning with. I know you've been doing this for many years, so we're very thankful to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you, what you do, and then we'll get started.
Sure. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, definitely. So yes, I am a partner of BDO Canada. Great firm. Love working there. So I am a CPA, recovering nicely, thank you. But most recently, I obtained the FEA designation, Family Enterprise Advisor. So a very long portion of my career has been devoted to helping families manage change. So change often is transitioning ownership and leadership from one generation to the next, or bringing the next generation of owners and leaders into a business, a family farm, things like that. And that's a fascinating career. And within the last few years, I've transitioned my accounting and tax clients to other great partners within BDO, and I've been doing this work solely. So I work probably 50 to 60% of my time in the agricultural sector, and the rest of it in commercial business and other different types of stakeholder groups.
Excellent. I have heard you speak several times to groups of farmers, and you're fantastic at what you do. So I'm excited to dive right in. I want to do a bit of a preface for the conversation. When I reached out to you about this episode, I know you were really exciting, and I think it's important. Over the next couple of months, I'm going to be diving in with various guests about the different parts of transition planning, but I figured an episode, How to Transition Plan, might be a great way to start. And I have always said that this topic can be intimidating and scary. And I stand by three things in my mind, and that's why I want to pick your brain. But I always stand by three big blocks that people have when it comes to transition planning. To me, one of them is communication. Oh my gosh, how do we start this conversation? Or I don't want to because I'm introverted. I don't want to cause fights, whatever the case is. Number two, there's that fair and equal part where, oh my gosh, I know as Tracy, let's say I'm the mom, the farm mom, I know I need to do this. We need to plan, and we're probably past the point when we should be planning, but I don't want to cause fights in the family. That's the second thing I think holds people up, kind of drawing on where I would get stumped up. And number three, if I can get myself past those first two, which are a lot of communication and conflict, is, oh my gosh, how do I even do this? Where do I even start? And that one, to me, I talk to you amazing advisors all the time. And if I didn't have that knowledge, I wouldn't know where to start. So long-winded intro. I'm so excited to have you. And I want to walk through 101, how to transition plan. So Why don't we start right at the top? And I touched on it a little bit, and I want your take on it. What do you see as the biggest challenges that families face when they start their transition planning?
Well, you hit them right on. Those are probably close to the top three, I think. And I think it stems back from fear. So maybe procrastination is a symptom of the fears. And the biggest one for parents or the senior generation is fear of conflict. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If I do this wrong, what's going to happen to my family? Yeah. And so that causes a delay. Let's go back to work because I'm a great farmer. This other stuff, I'm not sure I'm so good at this. And so they farm families often procrastinate and just wait until something happens to compel them to enter into the process of transition. I think other than that, I think sometimes there is patience is a bit of an issue. It seems to be I'm talking out of two sides of my hat here. But often I think farm families think that transition is a transaction. And they want to jump right to, okay, let's sign over ownership and you can lead this farm now without actually doing all of the work that it takes to get there. And I think maybe sometimes that's why the transition isn't as successful as it could be. And that's where conflict arises, misunderstandings arise, unmet expectations, things like that. Obviously, the lack of understanding of what transition is about is a big part of it, as you said. I think that farm families, believe it or not, I think communication sometimes is good, and they circulate a lot of ideas. There's a lot of random conversations, so there's a lot of good thought going on. What they sometimes lack is the structure to put all of that together and put it into a good plan and then execute that plan. And I mean, that's where people like me and the other advisors in this field come into play, as we bring structure to the conversation, making sure that the families are talking about the right things at the right time in the right context. And farm families, that family circle is an emotional system. And once there's conflict, then emotions start to escalate, and it makes it difficult to talk in a rational, logical manner sometimes. And again, having some structure, some coping mechanisms, or another party in there to help work that through, I think may help a lot. And I guess the last one may be, for lack of a better word, maybe there isn't the discipline necessary to follow through.
Okay.
So some of that is time. So you know what the biggest challenge for farm families is for transition planning?
What?
Planting, spraying, harvesting, marketing, shipping.
So you mean that stuff called farming that never stops?
Farming gets in the way.
Yeah.
So talked about spring is in the air, and it gets pretty quiet. And sometimes farmers don't want to talk to us as they get into this time of year because it's exciting for them. It's what they like to do, and I don't blame them for not wanting to spend time in a boardroom or at a meeting table. So that, having the discipline to set aside blocks of time and pay attention to it all through the year is a big challenge for them, definitely.
Okay. That's fantastic. Those were my three thoughts, and I figured they'd be similar because I watch and see and experiment within our farming operation. And at the end of the day, people are people, right? Families are families. We all share many of the same challenges and issues and obstacles. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to throw one in here that I didn't plan on asking you, and I never think until I sit down to talk to you guys. Let's start very 101. So we talk about some of the challenges. So now let's move to the next step. And this should be an easy one for you. Give a call out to BDO and other firms if you want to. I'm Tracy, mom, sitting at home, and I know we need to start this, okay? So who do I even call? Let's start there, because many people are going, yeah, okay, Tracy, you're telling me we need to do this and we want to do this, but who do we work with? Who's that person that leads us through? Do you mind touching on that before we even dive in deeper?
Yeah, sure, love to. I think the natural reaction, the natural place to go for a farm family is to their accountant, and specifically to their tax accountant, because I think farm families are under the impression that transition is all about the tax structure and saving tax and, creating a transition of ownership. And while that is one component of it, it's certainly not all of it. And from the point of view of the practitioner, the tax person, that really is the easier part. They're very smart, very, very studied, very familiar, especially in the accounting firms that deal in agriculture. So putting a structure together is not the difficult part. The difficult part is getting the family to be aligned on what they want to happen and being prepared to make it happen. Once that tax professional understands what the family is trying to achieve, building it to the layperson, it's not easy, but to that smart professional, it is a little easier.
Okay.
Where would you go? The Canadian Association of Farm Advisors has a number of different transition planning professionals, and their website shows all the specialties and all the accreditations that their members have. The Family Enterprise Exchange is another great resource for family businesses of all types, whether it be agriculture, commercial, whatever it is. Wonderful resource. They administer the FEA designation, which I have, and my colleagues within BDO have as well. And there are a number of FEAs across the country. It's growing every year as the designation gets more prevalent, more prestigious. So there's two associations that are specifically geared to helping families manage the complexity of their worlds. So, and then again, you can go to your accounting firm, you can go to your law firm, but I think you want to ask some pretty stiff questions about how they go about planning for the transition of a family enterprise, because it's a risky business if you think it could go awry. So, having people that are familiar with family systems theory and the interaction of the business with the family and how to build coping mechanisms and structures to make it happen well is an important part of the transition if you want a successful transition.
Okay, and I do want to build on that a little bit, because I think sometimes we do what we do every day and we maybe skim past those important how to and why to before we get into even the rest. So, and I want to be careful because there's amazing accountants and lawyers out there, and those might be two places that farmers start. As you said, that's the logical person, right? Hey, how do we transition this so we don't pay a ton of tax? That's how we think. I think that's been so much of the conversation in years gone by. But now let me connect the dots here. So with a family enterprise advisor, somebody like you that has that designation, I want to call you a coach, a systems. You look at more than just the legal, and I know we'll jump into that with our conversation, but you're somebody that can kind of take a family by the hand and say, here's what we need to look at. More than just taxes, more than just legal entities, why don't we talk about the family and the goals and the best way and to make sure that it's successful, right? Versus looking at one of the tiny pieces. You guys, I want to say a coach, a leader of the process. Is that right? Is that okay to say it that way?
Yeah, a coach is one way to put it. Facilitator is another one.
Right.
Facilitate conversations, facilitate the structure of those conversations so we're actually accomplishing something. Really having a good understanding of what our situation is, understanding what people's perspectives are on this whole thing within the family, understanding, trying to help the family develop a picture of the future or a vision of what they're trying to achieve here on a macro level, a large level, but also on a more detailed or micro level too. So my job is to create that atmosphere for safe conversations where people feel they can be transparent and open and leave themselves a little bit vulnerable, because that's how you resolve important issues. And that's how you explore all the options and make sure that everybody's needs are met as well as they can be. whether it be the children that are coming onto the farm, the generation that's leaving, or the children that have gone off and pursued other paths. There is somewhat of an interest on their part in this whole process. So part of my job is to give them a voice, not necessarily a vote, but a voice, so that they can be heard and they feel that they're part of the family. Fully realizing that the important aspect is the transition of the farm, but also having the family to stay intact and to keep their relationship strong and nurturing as they should be throughout that. So, and I joke that I was a recovering accountant, but I think my background as an accountant has given me a good appreciation and understanding of tax, of corporate structure, a bit of law, and my business experience has given me some knowledge around organizational behavior, human resources, things like that. I absolutely defer to the experts in those fields, but part of it is being able to build a plan that includes some of those elements, and then recognizing, well, we need to take that framework, that concept, to the very smart people that can make this happen. So.
Okay. Excellent. I just realized that's probably somewhere we should go, because again, getting started, where do you find somebody? Who do you look for? And how does that process start? So thank you for sharing that. Okay. So I think that just naturally leads into where we go next. So you are a facilitator. You help farm families through this process. Can you chat a little bit more about that?
How many days do you have?
Well, we try and keep our episode within a few hours, so right. No pressure.
Fair enough. Gosh, I forgot. I was going to bring a prop, but I'm going to have to describe it with my words. We look at the transition journey. One of the analogies we use is a funnel.
Okay.
And the funny story, my colleague, Brian Huck, also just got his FEA today, as a matter of fact. He bought a funnel, and he was speaking at an event with farm families there, and he brought this massive funnel up on stage to explain the concept, and he called it the VanParys funnel. It was a big hit. That name really didn't ring in the marketplace, so we renamed it the BDO funnel.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So the concept here is that the top of the funnel, where you pour in the ingredients, it's a little blurry up there, and the ingredients aren't really mixed well. They may not be homogeneous. So we're bringing in things like education, helping families understand what transition is about. Talking about the family values, which are their filtration system for solving problems and dealing with issues. Visions come into the top. And so we're collecting all these things and putting them into the funnel. As we start to go down the funnel, we clarify things. We'll start to clarify that vision for the future, trying to align everybody along where we're going and meet everybody's needs. Recognizing that there are some challenges out there that we may face, some things that we're going to have to deal with on the way. So identifying and naming those things. And making sure everybody's perspective is heard. As we go down the funnel, we're clarifying a little more, and we start to develop strategy. What are the things that we're going to do to address the challenges or answer the questions that we need to answer? So we're getting clear. And then we put together a plan of action. What order do we implement these strategies? How long does it take? Who's going to lead it? Very important. And so by the time we get to the bottom of the funnel, we're pretty clear on where we're going and what it takes to get there. And as it moves out of the funnel, we're actually signing documents and building structures and making that transition happen. So the funnel is a great analogy for that journey of transition.
That's excellent. I like a good visual. Good thinking.
Yeah. I wish I was going to bring the funnel, and I forgot. But oh well. So if you want our process, it's a combination of, there was a program developed by my predecessor called Success Care, and then when Grant Robinson retired, I took over that and started to develop it a little bit along my style. And then the FEA program, and we've now got at least 3 FEAs in our group. And so everybody contributed to that. So we developed our process, and the first stage is we call build the plan.
Okay.
So build the plan, it starts first with the goals of the founders, the senior generation. I mean, in most cases, almost all cases, that senior generation has built a business. They've worked hard all their lives. They've built the farm up to what it is today. The outcome should probably make sure it meets their goals and
Great.
takes care of them. So we want to really understand, and the other part of it I'd like to do with the founders is challenge them on the next stage of life. What does that look like? And not only financially, but from a personal point of view, what are you going to do to fill that time?
Yeah.
And and the other part of it is making sure that the founders, the spouses, are aligned, that they actually agree with each other on what that journey looks like. And it's enlightening sometimes, and it's actually heartening sometimes to listen to them talk about what their future looks like. So having a good understanding of where the founders are going, I think, is a big part of it. The next stage is we bring together all of the family, and it's not only the children that are active in the farm or hope to be active in the farm, but also their spouses and the children that have pursued other paths. If we talk about the 3-circle model, we understand that even though there are family members that aren't involved in transition, they have a connection back to the farm, whether it's an emotional one because they grew up on the farm and that's part of their identity. I've heard all kinds of people in the middle of a big city bragging to their compatriots that they come from a farm in southwestern Ontario. And I just love that because they do have a connection to it. And I guess indirectly, when you look at estate planning and inheritance, perhaps they have a financial connection or an interest in it as well. Irregardless, that's not a word. Regardless, having them understand what the process is going to be is important. They don't need to be involved in all of it. They don't need to know all of it. Having them understand that it's going to be a fair process based on the values of the family and that their interests are going to be considered in some way, I think puts some peace in the family. And so we do a lot around educating the entire family on what the process looks like. We talk about the fact that one day the parents will transition the farm, whether voluntarily or involuntary. Preparing for a nice, orderly, voluntary exit or transition actually is risk management, and it prepares in the event of a involuntary transition, like a death or a disability or a divorce. So we start to help the family understand there's steps we need to take to manage risk, to protect the family and protect the farm. So we're easing them into some of the harder discussions that will take place in the future around, prenuptial contracts, things like that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Complicated.
We do a little work around, one model we call positive outcome, which is used in mediation a lot around, we do work to understand the past, understand the principles and the values of the family, understand the history of the family and the relationships amongst the family, and also to understand the things that make each individual a little special. Their moods, their personalities, the way they're wired to view the world and solve problems. And again, just make sure they're aware of all the things and why we're going to do these, why we're going through all of these steps so that they can appreciate the importance of them and that we're in their best interest trying to affect a good transition. So that education piece is very important to us. So that family vision, after we go through that learning piece, we actually have the family go on a little journey through history. And we get mom and dad or uncles and aunts to start telling stories of how they got the farm from their parents, maybe, how they almost lost it or how they succeeded and all the things that happened on the way through their decades of farming. Great stories come out. and we get the kids engaged, okay, when did you start to work on the farm, and how did you like it? Why did you choose that path? When did you first realize you wanted to be a farmer? And so we get the family telling stories, which is fascinating. For me, that's the most fun part of the whole engagement, is listening to their stories.
That would be.
Yeah, and so stories will come up that the kids have never heard before.
I always like that. I find, sorry to jump in, but I found please. Like my grandparents' generation and my parents even, some of them don't love talking about the past. And I guess it's different personalities, but I always found it neat when they got a little talkative and shared some of those stories, because we don't know what they went through. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the parents feel that, the stories don't mean anything, they're not relevant, and nobody cares. But gosh, when you hear them tell it and you see the kids with their eyes wide open, that's neat.
Yeah.
And I've been in meetings where the tears have flowed and laughter has flowed, and a little bit maybe of a little bit of anger from something that might have happened in the past. So, but those stories are big.
Yeah.
Out of those stories, then we asked the family to go through a little bit of a values exercise. What did you hear in those stories that represent your family from a values point of view? What's important to your family? Why are you successful as a farm and successful as a family? And so the family then starts talking about their ideas on, yes, well, obviously hard work was a big part of our success. Yeah, perseverance was a big start. And some would say, stubbornness and integrity and things. So all these words start to come up to describe the things that represent the family. So it's a bit of a values exercise.
That is neat too, and that would create a good sense of community, right? Kind of get everybody on. Yeah, I could see that would be a nice spot. What are our values? What holds us together, right?
Yes.
Neat.
And it's one way to kind of reinforce that family circle is the most important circle.
Yes.
And this is a way to help and also to connect those kids that may not be involved in the farm back with the family.
Very nice.
After we're done looking at the values, we ask them to, let's describe in the future what you hope your family is going to be like. Transition can be a bumpy road. And if we do it well, what do you want your family to be like? What do you want it to be like in that family circle? And you hear lots of input about, sometimes it's community contributions, sometimes it's faith, sometimes it's that connection and making sure that we can, it's always, I want everybody to be happy. I want my family to be home for Christmas dinners and birthdays. I want to grow up with my cousins and my grandchildren. And those are powerful words. And it just reinforces that, the farm is important, the legacy is important, the money is important, because that's what feeds us, but the family, it trumps all of that. So if we can do a good job there, we can do a good job with the rest of it.
Brent,
so we kind of start with that family circle. Yeah.
I got to jump in there really quick. And Please. I think I've shared a little bit of my story. Why, and I don't get too vocal, but I imagine anybody watching this show knows of a family where succession planning didn't happen or didn't go right, and the consequences, right? And that's why that's actually the sole reason I started this show, is because I've seen it gone bad. I've experienced it gone bad. I live with that in my life, and I don't want that for our generation. And I've said it a few times on this show, it's important to talk about those things and do this planning. Maybe they didn't have the tools in my grandfather's generation or the awareness, and let's forgive them for that. But, with shows and experts and tools that you guys have, there's no reason that we cannot successfully do transition planning now and prevent these family disasters from happening, right? Because at the end of the day, we all love the land, et cetera, but that's not what breaks the heart at the end of the day, right? No,
that's exactly right. And part of that family vision and values meeting, that education process, is to help families understand that the transition is a journey. It's not a transaction itself. and that it's important to pay attention to all three of those systems, the three-circle model developed by Tagiri and Davis. Pay attention to the family, prepare the family. Pay attention to the business itself, how it's run, how it's managed, how it's led, how it's forward-looking, how they communicate and make decisions. Pay attention to that circle. And pay attention to the ownership and the family wealth. How do owners get in and get out? How do you be fair to all of your children?
Yeah.
And so that education piece is important to prepare them for the journey that comes and instill in them a little bit of patience and hopefully some discipline to follow it through.
Okay.
So that family meeting, my favorite, but then we have to move into the actual planning for the other two circles. So most often we'll compress the team so that the family members that aren't involved in the farm or don't intend to be often will not participate in the next couple of stages. And so we'll get to the people that are actually already in the farm for a career or intend to be or might be.
Okay.
Sometimes the in-laws, the spouses of those people will be involved, sometimes not. And, I talk to the family about what that means to them and they let them make their choices. And I weigh in, I give them the options, and I actually do say what I think every once in a while. And so then they'll make the choice as to who that planning team is.
Okay.
From there, we'll take them through something called a discovery questionnaire. So it's an online questionnaire just to gauge their opinions on how prepared they think they are, their family is, for transition in each of those three circles and in the overlap areas of communication. So we get some good data coming back, some perspectives that are confidential, other than my job is then to share that with the family. And it comes out in a nice graphical form. It shows whether they agree with each other or they don't agree, whether they think they're doing well in a particular area or not doing so well. And it's just good information to give a perspective on where they are now.
Okay.
So we get a good baseline. Yeah. Much as with the family circle, we'll start the planning team meetings with, kind of a forward-looking exercise for the business itself. Developing some vision, some forward-looking statement of what we want the farm business to achieve. And we're trying to, in a broad, high-level way, trying to see if the generations are aligned and where the farm's going, or the people of the generation are aligned as well on where it's going. So the vision might include statements around growth or diversification or reinvestment or how the business might be led, the management transition. So it talks about various things that are important in the transition, but not at a great deal of detail. Okay. We're still way up in that funnel, just trying to get some direction and guidance and identify where the families may be not aligned, so we can address that in a way before we jump in and try to dive to a technical solution.
Makes sense.
We'll do this. Yeah. Then we'll do the same thing with ownership. Let's talk about how you get in, who might be able to get in. Part of that is to identify some important pieces of it. Some families will say only blood descendants of grandpa and grandma will be able to own this farm. Others are welcoming to spouses. Do you need to pay for your interest in the farm? How, in broad context, how is it going to be done? Is there, does mom and dad need income from the farm to sustain their lifestyle and provide them with financial security? So there's a lot of elements we can explore at a high level just to get some direction and just to introduce concepts that are important to the family around ownership and the transition of ownership. And inevitably in there is going to become the concept of fair. How do I be fair to all of my children, which, as you are very well aware, is a big issue in the agricultural sector right now.
Fair and equal.
Yeah.
That big conversation.
The overwhelming value of land or even quota in the business, in the farm, makes it very difficult to be fair to other children.
Yeah.
And it is almost impossible to be equal. Not impossible, but somewhat. So we start to introduce those topics at that visioning level, so so it can bubble. So we've got some perspective on where we're trying to go. Hopefully we're getting some alignment, or we've identified where we're not aligned, which may change the direction of the facilitation a bit. Once we've got that vision, we're going to ask the family to identify challenges. What are we going to have to deal with on this journey? What are the questions that haven't been answered for you? What are the challenges or obstacles that you think we're going to face? What do we have to deal with? Great exercise. It's a kind of a safe way an objective way to introduce things that are concerning to you, things that maybe you're worried about, because all we're doing is brainstorming for challenges. In my role there, in the visioning section, I create structure for the conversation. I ask the right questions, but the vision has to be the families. Once we get to the challenges, I make sure that they're doing the work to identify as many as they can, and then I'll add the things that I know that they may face on the way through, so that they have a complete list, because that list is what we'll build strategy around.
Okay.
Once we've identified challenges, I do meet individually with all the planning team members, just to make sure that everything that should have gotten to the table did get to the table, and confirm that the vision makes sense for them, and that they recognize the challenges. So it's a good confidential conversation to make sure that all the stuff got to the table that should. And
that's a great idea. Let me jump in there really quick, because I imagine maybe that if there's in-laws or somebody maybe more introverted in the family that doesn't like confrontation or doesn't want to speak up, maybe that's where they're sitting there going, help, I have thoughts, but I don't want to say it for whatever reason. And if you meet with all of them separate, they'll likely open up to you, I'd imagine, at that point.
They do tend to open up, and because it is confidential. But what we're trying to do out of that is identify things that really must be addressed. Things that if we leave and ignore them, they could bubble up in the future. So my job will be to bring back my findings from those interviews in a way that doesn't identify any of the individuals, but identifying the items, the issues that do need to be dealt with. And all the positive issues too. Yeah, I found that everybody's very enthusiastic. They love the direction of the business, and they understand all of the things that we've tried to accomplish. So there are positives that come out of those interviews, and then some of the things that maybe we're going to have to add to that list of challenges, which is okay, as long as we identify them. Yeah.
As you talk about this, I just go, wow. To be able to have somebody essentially be your guide, your facilitator, and walk you through, take you by the hand, so to speak, and walk you through. And you guys have seen this countless times. So there's probably a list of 10 things for each point that everybody needs to be thinking about, that a family that does this once would never think about. That's
how would you know? Yeah.
You don't know. You don't know, right? That's just invaluable to be asking those questions. And if identified over here, could potentially avoid an explosion over here, right?
Yeah. And then for every one of those challenges that do hit the board or hit the list, a family someplace has tripped over them, and it's to their detriment, unfortunately. But,
I can see that.
Yeah. And you thought, I'm going to go back to that. What are some of the challenges that family face in transition? The concept of patience, because farmers are typically entrepreneurs. They're solutions-driven people. Find me a problem, and I will fix it. This is, for some people, slow and plodding. Can be. But part of the role of the facilitator is to bring the family to the same destination at relatively the same time. But as we do know that even people from the same family process information differently, make decisions differently, understand differently.
Absolutely.
And so the quick thinkers who have already, almost made it to the finish line are going to have to wait for the others to catch up. So they need some patience.
Oh, my favorite word, patience. You can imagine which personality type I am, right? The entrepreneur. Let's get it done yesterday.
That's right. And that's what it takes to build and a successful business.
It's true. Yeah.
And then, so those strategies, the next meeting, after we've identified the challenges, we've had our interviews, we're coming back and now it's time to develop that plan. What are we going to do? Okay. In order to reach that vision, that picture of the future that we're looking at, we've got some things that we need to address, some questions that need to be answered. How are we going to do that? And so we'll be developing strategy to prepare the family circle, which we have done to a certain extent. More importantly, to the farm family will be the strategies that prepare the business. Okay. We want to transition a well-running, financially healthy business that has an aligned group of leaders capable of taking over the business from the last generation, or a partnership between generations that functions well in the business. Amen. So preparing the business circle, it's in everybody's best interest that that business be healthy and run well. So we do pay attention to that, provided that the family agrees that that's something that they need. And we develop strategy to prepare the ownership circle as well. Let me see, what are our principles of ownership? And the primary components are, how do you get in? How do you get out? What happens when you get out, either voluntarily or involuntary, the 5 Ds, if you've ever heard of those. Do you know the 5 Ds, Tracy?
I can think of a few of them. Share the rest.
Death, disability, disagreement, divorce, debt.
Oh.
All those 5 Ds can cause an involuntary exit.
I thought of 2.
Okay,
divorce and death. That's the 2 I had.
So preparing that ownership circle is to develop the principles and the policies. Again, we're moving down the funnel. We're not at the bottom yet, but we get the family to start talking about the principles of ownership. How do they feel about family members coming in? How do they feel about family members leaving? How do you do it? And how do you decide? What does it look like to work together as owners? And then, the concept of being fair to others. So developing strategies to prepare that whole ownership system and the transition of the family wealth eventually, and the security of the senior generation, mom and dad, to make sure they can live the life that they want to, that they've got financial security and they've got the ability to meet their definition of fair for their entire family. Okay. So that ownership circle is very important.
I have seen personally, this is a sneaking suspicion from stuff I have seen. And I think it starts right up at the top. And the most important question, in my opinion, again, from what I have seen, is they don't answer, back that card up. Very often, the founding generation is on the farm, working the farm, making their living from the farm, and the next generation wants to come in, but nobody knows how to give the founders income, so the conversation doesn't start. They don't know those tools, right? Mm-hmm. If you're living off the farm and you're knowing that son or daughter wants to come in or buy, and you're not seeing as a founder what your future looks like, isn't Tracy going to clam up and go, I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how we're going to survive if we retire. So I'm just not going to talk about this. We're going to farm till the day we die, and then we'll pass it on. I've seen it happen.
Yep, I agree. It can be. And also how does a farm that's only supported one family all of a sudden support 2 or 3 or 4? Is it financially feasible? And are there other sources of wealth or income that can help the senior generation manage their lifestyles in the future? Or do we have to make some more adjustments somehow?
And I want to jump in there one more time, Brent. To me, what excites me is if there's people in the audience that are around my age or even younger, the better. Doesn't it make a lot of sense that now that we have this information available to us, to start thinking about this stuff right now and building, hey, okay, one day we know our kids are going to take over. What's going to support our retirement? I try and look forward so that you don't get to 60 and go, oh my gosh, I didn't do this right. We can't retire. There's not enough here. Kind of taking the knowledge and doing it at a younger age, right?
Yes, because the one thing about transition planning is once one ends, the other one starts or has started already.
Right.
And
yes.
I think the first time we met, my phrase was create a culture of transition.
Yes.
I think that's important.
Yes, you're very right.
So building up a pool of wealth outside of the company to have the ability, to maybe make it easier to transition the farm at some point in time will just make everybody's life easier, and it enables that senior generation to actually realize the fruits of their labor and have a great next stage in their life, and while leaving a stable, well-operating farm. So the ownership circle, the strategies around the ownership circle need to pay attention to all of that, including now those estate arrangements. So we can talk about the specific strategies that might go to each circle if you want to in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Well, and I guess really that's the next logical flow for this conversation. We chat about how you walk family through, and then now rolling into what comes out of the process. Do you want to go there?
Well, the last step in the process is about creating an action plan out of those strategies.
Okay.
So we take the family through an exercise of prioritizing them. What should we do first and second and third and fourth, how many strategies there are, let's rank them in order of importance. There are some families where the transition of ownership is somewhat urgent.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, whether there's pressure from the next generation, whether it's far past time to transition ownership, perhaps there's an imminent death coming. And I've been in those situations where this, one or more of the senior generation has a terminal illness.
That's
now, ownership transition is top priority. So we'll prioritize based on the needs of the family. Okay. And then, like I said, assign responsibilities and timelines to make sure that this stuff gets done.
Nice.
And, that out of all we just talked about, that builds up a plan.
Okay.
So the process is planning, which we've just described, and then implementation.
Okay. I love a good to-do list. Check.
It is a to-do list for sure.
Nice.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So out of the process comes a plan. You assign by urgency. You assign who needs to do what by dates, I'd imagine, to hold people accountable. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, we got to get going. So I can give you a few examples of strategies that you might use for each of these circles.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I think the number one piece, the number one step would be to find somebody in the family that can be that transition champion, the driver, the person that's going to, the thankless job of coordinating and urging people on, trying to hold some accountability in there, make sure things get done and are being done. And if you're using outside professionals or even a facilitator to walk alongside the family through that journey, that inside coordinator still plays a very important role.
You need that person. You would need a leader. If everybody else is kind of too busy farming, I highly doubt you're going to make a lot of progress if there isn't that one person that's concerned about it, right? Not concerned, but responsible for it.
And that person needs to be organized. They need to have good skills of communication and motivation, and there are, within a family, there is always one or two people that have those skills. Okay. And so identifying and getting them to actually accept the role is important, I think.
Okay, excellent.
You silence the doubters. You get the best tools. You work with the right people. You look to the future and bust through.
Okay, so we went through all those steps. We have a plan. We've assigned it. We have somebody responsible. Any other thoughts? I'm just trying to get the best of Brent's wisdom out of your mind here. So I'm gonna keep on asking until we're done.
It's a thick wall, so I'm not sure you're...
I'm good.
So I think, and again, depending on the family's priorities, the needs, there are things that you can do in the family circle to make sure that the family is stable, connected, actually, in harmony. That vision and values meeting is one step. Some families might put together a constitution, a charter, how we show up in the community, what we believe in, what we're trying to achieve. There are families that aspire to be leaders of the United States or leaders of the free world. Other families aspire to serve their faith. Other families, want to accomplish different things. Other families want to be wealthy. Other families want to be wealthy in relationships. So if you can, that is a nice connecting family building exercise to go through.
I like that. In the entrepreneurial world, there's a lot of the culture and core values and mission and vision. That's really what you're saying is a culture. What's our family culture? And it's already there. It just maybe nobody's named it. We're the curling champions of Southeast Manitoba, whatever it is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of the culture of the family.
Well, that's what makes family business so powerful, so important in the world economy, is that the family brings its value system, all of its beliefs and its, and its patience and its all of the things that make family special. They bring that into the business. And global corporate companies can't do that. They try to do it, and they tout their core values, and they do the best they can, but families do it naturally.
Yes.
And it's beautiful to watch when it happens well. So one of the things you can do in that family circle, especially if the next generation is relatively young, say maybe one or so has started to get into the business, but there's others in the wings. We have something called a strategy called a family participation plan or family participation policies. So working with the family to develop the guidelines around how you can have a career at the business, what you may have had to accomplish before you're getting there, whether it be education or working elsewhere or developing some skills. And then, well, how do you have a career? How do you actually get the job? Do you have to be interviewed? Do you have to send a resume in? How do you get the job? How do you develop your skills? How do you move up in the organization? How do you eventually become a leader within the organization? So again, not a lot of detail, but some policies and guidelines. And then eventually it'll be, well, how do you become an owner? What does it look like? What must you have accomplished or brought to the table in order to be an owner? And it can deal with things like conduct within the business and things and items like that. But it is a beautiful way to connect the family values with the policies of the business. And it provides some clarity for the next generation on what a career looks like with the farm and how they can rise to the top or leadership. It also provides some guidelines when the senior generation is having to make some decisions. Imagine you and your brother or your sister are running a farm. Each of you has children that are on the threshold of their careers. You need one person on your farm. Both of them would like the job. How do you make that decision without any kind of guidelines to do it?
Yikes.
You can see the opportunity for conflict.
Yeah.
So clarity for the younger generation, guidelines for decision making for the older. It works. It's a nice strategy for that, to link that family circle with the business. Also in there, I think communication, you picked that as a major obstacle to transition. We do work around communication. We help families understand the fundamentals of communication. We help teach them about conflict management and conflict resolution. We'll actually use more scientific tools like behavioral assessments or work style assessments. You've probably heard of lots of them, Myers-Briggs or Colby or things like that. We'll use that to help promote good communication, both self-awareness and group awareness, and then teach them how to run good meetings.
That's powerful.
And because the family system is sometimes not all that structured in its communication.
Right.
Imagine that. I mean, maybe your family is, mine's not.
Imagine that. I don't know. Families are interesting.
They are. They are. So if we can, part of our objective here is to urge the family towards a little more formalization when they run the business, a little more professional, not whatever that is for the family, a little more structure. Communication is part of that.
I love it.
So
in the corporate world, again, I've implemented a lot of this in my company. There's different philosophies, but the vision, the BHAG, all the goals, all that kind of stuff. And one of the main things they say is communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you think it's clear, communicate some more. Mm-hmm. I'm a communicator, but that's not necessarily easy. And especially if you don't have the know-how, you shut down, right? But one of the things I think, and this ain't no genius work here, but one of the 3 core things that I think are that happen in relationships and family businesses: lack of communication, expectation, and assumption. And if a family, I love what you're saying, because you're with the generation and whoever's at that table, you're not only handling that transition, you're preparing that family how to be a business for generations to come. And if you're clear and clear and clear, I just love it, because clarity, there's nobody guessing what's going to happen. They don't show up on the farm, work for 30 years, expect to own the farm, and then it all goes bad. I love those activities that you are suggesting, because how do you work on this farm? Well, there's 2 positions and ... There is this. And if it's clear, to me, I can't help but imagine there's going to be, clarity. And in the end, we hope the family's still together, because there's no assumptions thinking I'm joining the farm and then I'm mad and resentful when it doesn't happen. If it's clear, it's clear. Right? And you don't spend 20 years investing into a farm operation to be told you can't own it, right?
Yeah, and you're hitting all the right concepts, the right words. Clarity is a big one, and that's what we strive for. That's the purpose of all of this. And unmet expectations cause conflict. We know that. Yeah. Misunderstandings cause conflict. So the more we can clarify things, help everybody understand what to expect and what's expected of them, the better off we're going to be. Both generations.
I love it. Yeah.
So that communication shouldn't be random. Families communicate randomly. Businesses need to communicate structurally to the purpose of making decisions and creating good productive workflow. And so that's part of the challenge, is that, businesses or farms that have transitioned from generation to generation have developed their communication system. Some of them do it very well, others not so well. Yeah. So if it's something that we need to work on, we have the capabilities of helping them develop that good structured communication system, whatever that means to them. It's got to be functional. It's got to be efficient, because entrepreneurs do not like meetings. So the best thing you can do is get good at them and get back to work. So that's what we try.
Speaking to me.
We look at things like business plans in the business circle. Should we develop a forward-looking business plan to align everybody on where we're going, give everybody, the people that are going to be involved in the business, contribute to the direction of the business, understand the things that we're going to be doing over the next several years, the investments we're going to make, the forecasted profitability of the farm. So developing a good business plan. I have led a number of businesses over my career, none of them without a business plan. I think that's so critical and so ignored.
Yep.
And so that makes the strategy list almost every time, because it's so important to align the incoming generation with the senior generation to make sure that everybody understands where we're going and we're actually facing in the same direction. We're making decisions based on a good business plan.
Well, and I think that's super important too when you have the next generation coming up, because I'm at that age, I think, where I walk the middle line. I can appreciate the founders and where they're at and how they could be feeling and their tolerance for risk, but I'm also young enough where I just came from the eager stage and how hungry you are and you want to grow and it's not fast enough or big enough. So having a business plan, especially between the generations, hey, this is how we are going to expand, is super important, because sometimes, and I mean, that's the great thing about being young, right? You're enthusiastic, but it needs to make sense and be clear. And as we are sometimes told, the older generation, well, they're ramping down the risk, right? Do they want to grow this operation, double the size? Where do we meet, right?
It's funny because that would be what you would expect, because the senior generation has built equity. They know that they're going to exit sometime, and so they want to protect that equity. And they want to de-risk a little bit. And you figure the younger generation wants to go, let's get this thing going. I've seen the opposite.
Really?
In some cases, I've seen, the kids are saying, okay, we need to protect. Let's just slow down and kind of creep along. Well, we've got a good thing going here. And the parents are thinking, you cannot not grow. Get going. You need to be aggressive. And it's fabulous to watch. It's neat because that interchange of ideas and philosophies comes up with a great business plan.
That's neat.
If you can foster that, if you can harness it, you'll get a good plan. And you know something? We talked about communication. The business plan is probably one of the best forms of communication you can have in the business circle.
I believe it. It's written. It's there.
It's written. It's a combination. It's the product of collaboration amongst the generation that's going, both generations that have led or are going to lead the business. The next generation needs to have a say in this because they're going to have to live it. Okay. So it's important that they have a say. The senior generation has a vested interest in the success of the business and the security of their equity. Everybody's got an interest in that business plan and making it work well.
Huh, interesting.
So out of that, we understand where the business is going. Sometimes we'll look at the management structure itself. Often in a family farm, roles evolve. They just kind of evolve. There's no intention. It kind of evolves, and everybody picks up the work that they naturally like to do, or somebody else didn't do it, so I've got that one, etc. No real role definition. Sometimes that works wonderfully. Mm-hmm. But when you add new players to the mix, maybe you're bringing in cousins or even siblings, role boundaries or understanding who's responsible for what is important, because if you get into a place where it's somebody else's responsibility, again, conflict can arise, especially in a family. So we often look at the management or organization structure itself, or the role descriptions, and there may be a strategy around the people and how they work together, and their responsibilities, and most importantly, their authorities. Oh. What decisions can I make in my role? What do I need to bring back to the table?
That's important.
It is. Some of the authority is given by the business plan, but in the interests of communication and transparency, bringing the right decisions to the table to make a group decision is important, and knowing which is which, I think, is important. Compensation is always a potential controversial subject in a family business, in a farm. So one of the strategies might be to develop policies around how compensation is set and what total compensation might be.
Okay.
And funny as it's, compensation might include housing, vehicles, fuel, farm produce, obviously wages, benefits, and how that's established becomes very important. Some families believe that you should be paid less because you're going to reinvest in the farm, because that's what it takes to grow the farm, so you get paid less. Okay, if everybody understands that, that's okay. And as everybody perceives it's fair, that's good. Mm-hmm. It's tough when it's imposed upon you, and the relative fairness may not be there. This is a place where the family circle and the business circle overlap drastically. The family circle, everybody's equal.
Yes.
And those with kids know that there has to be the same number of boxes under the Christmas tree for every child,
Right.
or the same amount of money in the envelope.
Yep.
Because in the family, you're equal. I love all my children equally. In the business circle, theoretically, you should earn your money, earn your ascension in the business. And so how do you do that? How do you compensate? Big piece, big important to try to reduce the opportunity for conflict and be fair to everybody. How do we develop that next generation, learn them the skills? Is it by mentoring? Is it by just on the job, or does there education? Does the company support education and development? That's a big piece. And I think also being clear on what management transition looks like. What the senior generation may want to stay in their roles for a while. What do those roles look like? How is it going to migrate out at some point in time? And who's going to take over their responsibilities on that journey? Being clear about that makes for a better business. It also reduces the opportunity for conflict.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal, that one is. And that's what we work with the founder, the senior generation, to try to describe their ultimate role. What do you want to do in this business? Do you want to pull a full shift? Do you want to just, do you want to put me in a combine and let me go? Or do you want to be involved in the decision-making and all those discussions? And if you can describe your ultimate, or do you want to be out completely? If you describe what it's for you, then we can start to take those stones out of your bucket and put them into somebody else's bucket and prepare them.
I think that one right there, from all the families I know, that is a key point right there, right? Because often the founders don't want to retire. They haven't thought or spoke. And fair, like I said, I'm walking that line. And the thing with farming, by the time you're actually going and doing it and really involved, to the time where if you had children coming up and they're ready, you might have, 20, 30, 40 years, but we know it goes by like that. And every year you're getting better and better. So I can imagine, and I have a sympathy, a compassion for that next generation, where you probably think, no, it's just getting going. It's still going good. I want to do this. And how do you want to let go? You're an entrepreneur, so you have a steel backbone. You're used to being in charge, I'd imagine. Mm-hmm. Now you just got to get out of the way.
Yep.
I think that's another one, because I could see that. I mean, and of course I'm aware and I learn from great experts like you, but that human nature, oh no, I'm just getting going. I don't want to be kicked to the curb, right?
For sure. And realistically, the senior generation has a lot to offer.
Yes.
So harnessing that and using it properly while developing that next generation into good leaders, that takes some doing. It takes some purposeful planning and execution. And it shouldn't be just random or ad hoc. So I think that's a big piece of it. And management transition is about the transition of authority, the authority to make decisions. And that should be somewhat clear for everybody. So those are the kind of things that we use to prepare the business circle. And not every transition plan includes all of those things. It depends on what the situation, what their needs are, and their willingness to undertake some of those. So as we move into the ownership circle, there's where we're looking at how do you get in to own the business, how do you get out? And so developing those ownership principles at a high level, not at a lot of detail, but starting to ease into the ownership piece. How do I become an owner? What does it look like? What are my obligations as an owner, and who makes that decision? And then how do I get out, voluntarily or involuntarily? So we develop the principles around ownership, which down the funnel start to clarify into a shareholders agreement or a partnership agreement. So those principles can then get converted into the legal document of a shareholders agreement. I think that a lot of farm owners, especially the next generation, any business owner, they have not a full understanding of what it means to be an owner. Okay. What your rights are, what your responsibilities are, what your risks are. So part of this in the ownership circle is a little more intense education on what it means to be an owner And so we spend some time at that and developing those ownership principles, and even drilling into the shareholders agreement, developing the provisions of a shareholders agreement is a wonderful educational exercise, not just for the young generation. And so we're forming a basis to protect the company, protect the shareholders and the family. And once we've done that, we can transition ownership. We can actually put values on the shares. We can do whatever corporate reorganization we need to do. We can engage the tax professionals and the lawyers to actually affect a transition of ownership. And whether that be an exit or an entrance or both, that's when those technical professionals come to the table.
Okay. That's great.
I've got a couple more and then we can move on. I think sometimes the senior generation, they've been on the farm, had their housing paid for, had their vehicles paid for, their insurance and property taxes, and so they take just what they need in cash to have a good living. Sometimes they don't put money aside, as we talked about before, and they may not really fully understand what post-farm financial needs look like.
Yes.
So we often recommend that senior generation use the services of a personal financial planner to fully understand what their financial situation looks like, which gives them a great idea as to what they might need out of the farm on an ongoing basis, or as a lump sum to provide them with financial security. Knowing that provides them with a great deal of comfort, confidence, and peace of mind. So go back to the business plan, which is telling us what the farm is going to generate hopefully in cash flow, and the financial plan for the exiting owners. Somewhere in there is a balance that says this is what we can afford to take out of the farm in order to sustain our lifestyle and do the things we want to do.
Excellent. I think that's an important activity because I think farm life, just like you said, has a way of blurring things because your cost of living gets lumped in with your big farm mortgage. Your fuel potentially is free because it's on the farm. And it goes on like that. I actually laughed at Anthony the other day, my husband, and I said, "You're so disconnected from real life because of the farm." And it was around something similar to that. It's just a farm lifestyle and business is a little bit different than the day-to-day of two people working. Same concept, but exactly just like you said, if you live this way forever and then all of a sudden you're over here, oh, that's what a mortgage on a house costs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. So from the ownership circle point of view, the last thing, and really what ties the ribbon around all of the ownership transition and the fairness aspect is an estate plan. A good look at your wills and your powers of attorney and your asset distribution plan. And this is where the senior generation needs to define fair.
Okay.
How can they be fair to all of their family members after the transition of the farms, and what happens if they pass away? Making sure that the ownership transition plan, the way it's going to be done, will happen the way it's supposed to be done, even if somebody passes away. Okay. So protecting everybody's interests here and making sure it gets taken care of. You know, in that ownership circle, you might look at ways to be fair, like life insurance, for example, or, you know, the concept of borrowing to pay out some of the equity to create a pool of wealth outside. So there's lots of different ways depending on the needs of the family. But I think in that estate plan, transparency becomes important, especially to the family members who aren't connected to the farm. Some level of transparency, some revisit with the family to say, this is what the transition plan looks like. Everybody believes it to be fair. We're going to have a healthy farm, and we love all of you. I think that's a big deal, that somewhere along that journey that you remember to touch base with the rest of your family, those that aren't involved in the farm. Just they have an interest, whether it's emotional or financial, and being a little transparent can go a long way.
I hear you. Clarity. I love it. Clarity is key.
That would be kind of a transition journey, and it takes some time.
That's excellent. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. And if you can't answer because it's not cut and dry cookie cutter like Tracy wants it, black and white, how long does this take? What does a family look at for this process?
Well, let me see. There's a concept that they teach you in the chartered accountancy profession and in the legal profession and in the medical profession. It depends.
Oh. I figured you were going to give me that one. I guess it does, right? It even does. Probably on the speed of the family too, because I know different legal stuff and accounting stuff that I have rolling, but you know what? I get really busy in my business and then it has to sit for a month. And then you pick it back. Unfortunately, we all wish we could do stuff snap, 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 but sometimes time is of essence and you got to get stuff done. Then I pick it up and we're a month behind already. It doesn't take long for time to fly, right?
Yes, but it depends on the circumstances of the family. And, sometimes it's the age or the point in their development of the next generation. Are they capable of leading and running this business? It could be the urgency of the senior generation to move on to the next stage of their life. It could be because of they want to, or it could be for health reasons. Ideally, I think you should probably look at 3 to 5 years around this to help develop the next generation of leaders and get the senior generation accustomed and adjusted to their next stage of life, which can be fantastic, and stabilize the business. And I think that's ideally you need to take time.
That makes sense.
You can push through a number of the things and be done in a year if you want to. I don't think that affects a great transition. I think sometimes the incoming generation gets frustrated because there's no, as you said, clarity. There's no definite, and so they're working away, helping build the value of the farm with no real guarantee that they're going to share in that, other than sometimes it's not even a spoken promise. And it's that situation does exist. And so all of a sudden you see the next generation into their 40s and, oh gosh, then that 50 hits and they have no ownership. And the senior generation is still controlling. And
that's not fair, because those years
doesn't seem to be. Yeah.
Those are critical. I mean, for the person, if there's no clarity, that's not nice. Nor should there be an assumption from the younger generation. But when you're taking your 30s and 40s and some of your prime working years in a career and investing that, to me, I would want to know where that's going, right?
Mm-hmm. Without question. Yeah, because it's in your 30s and early 40s where you really start to make a mark in your career. Mm-hmm. And by the time you hit late 40s, or even earlier than that, you want a piece of the rock.
Yeah.
And you probably deserve it by that point in time. Now, that's not in every circumstance. Sometimes either one of the generations is not prepared, and who knows? Family dynamics, emotions play a big role in this. And,
I have seen the farmers that don't do transition planning, the very domineering, controlling, older style, I would assume. And finally, when he got to talking about transitioning the farm child that was supposed to take over, probably with no clarification in there, was 50. Mm-hmm. In a career. He wasn't even on the farm. He wasn't on the farm, and all of a sudden, hey, you get the farm. Well, wait a minute. I'm 50 years old. Do you think I want to take on millions of dollars of debt at 50? For his case. Other people, yes, but...
Oh, by the way, I don't know how to farm.
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, it's a good number of years that he had been off the farm. Coming out on a weekend is different than farming every day of your life. So anyways, that's a dramatic scenario, but clarity, just do everybody a favor. That's my rant. Sorry.
Good job. Yeah.
You want to bring me into your sessions, Brent, and I will hammer home communication?
I should put up a video, Tracy, of just
the snippet of this video. Do what she says. Oh, fun. Anyways, I'm off my soapbox. Carry on there.
No, I'm good. I think we've pretty much covered that journey, and that would be a full journey, and that would be something that takes some time. But I think it might give your listeners an idea of what a full journey could be like. But keep in mind, it's that plan is not written in stone. Circumstances change as you go. I've seen lots of things have to take a left or a right turn partway through because of circumstances, whether they be tragic or just a change in mind or a change in philosophy. There's lots of different things that can impact it, but at least you're on a journey, and the farther you get through, the more prepared the family and the business and the family wealth will be as you move through. So. Yeah.
And time's flying anyways while you're planning, right?
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
We are a year into COVID, and I don't know about your time, but my time goes like that. So I can imagine when you're starting that process, it's like buying land or anything. It's just go, go, go. Okay, we got to do this. And then maybe you sit and think for a little bit. It doesn't take long for a year to go by when you're planning.
I was talking to a couple of brothers that own a very big farming operation. They're busy people. Next generation is coming in, and I said, we need to start getting moving, because within a month and a half, you're not going to want to talk to me. And they said, no, we have to talk to you. We have to do this, and it doesn't matter whether we're planting, spraying, or harvesting. We need to block time off to pay attention to this. Otherwise, we won't get it done. And that is refreshing to hear.
Yeah, good. That's good to hear. Okay, well, that was phenomenal. That was some great information. I'm so glad we did this episode, because so often, maybe in seminars or articles, we hear we got a plan. We got to do transition planning. But what does that look like? And I think in an hour plus that we just covered, that is process start to end. So that was incredibly valuable. Thank you.
Good. My pleasure.
You have shared amazing words and knowledge and wisdom. Do you have any parting final words for farmers in our audience that are watching? You can take that where you want to go. Sure.
I think, and I've already said these things, but they bear repeating, I think, and bear emphasis. I think that one of the most important things is to be inclusive of your family at whatever level is appropriate, but include your family in this thing. Don't try to impose or design a transition plan that doesn't involve their input. And be transparent in what you're trying to do as much as you can. I know that the family members that aren't involved in the business don't need to know all the details of the farm, whether it makes money, what it's worth, but there are some levels of the transition that they should know about if you want to keep peace and harmony in the family. I think it's important to pay attention to all three circles: the family, the business, and the ownership or the wealth. And there's another piece in there, another system that we didn't address, is that's yourself. Prepare yourself. Ensure that you're showing up in the right way, that you've adjusted yourself and prepared for your next stage in life, whether it be as a business leader or in your post-business life. Prepare yourself, I think, is important. Engaging your family is important. Collaborating in the planning process, making sure that the people that matter are heard, especially the people that are going to be involved in the business. Make sure that they are heard and they have a voice. The owners of the day, the senior generation, are going to determine the vote. They have the vote. But the next generation has to live this for the next 30 or 40 years. Give them a voice at least. And be patient. Be patient, be disciplined. Build the plan and follow it. And find that internal champion, somebody that's in there that's going to cheer on everybody, hold them accountable, make sure things are moving along. That internal person is so important. And all of your listeners, you know who that person is in your family, so you can find them. I know you can. And get help. We talked about the Canadian Association of Farm Advisors. We talked about the Family Enterprise Advisors, or if you look to professional services firms that have a business transition group internally, get some help for sure. This is not a do-it-yourself exercise, I don't think. No. You do it once in your life, possibly twice. How could you be good at it? And I guess that's my wisdom.
That's excellent.
Oh, don't forget to have fun, because it can be fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We get so serious, and this is our legacy, right? To celebrate while you're doing these activities. That is, well, can you imagine being able as founders to pass on a legacy in a farming operation like that? That's pretty cool. Not everybody in this world gets to do that, right?
That's worthy of a celebration. And so maybe the strategy in that family circle is to set aside time to celebrate.
Nice.
Throw open the doors and have a blast. Celebrate what you've achieved. Because, yeah, that is special, being able to pass on a thriving business to the next generation of your family to help ensure the legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty special. Excellent. Well, you know what, Brent? You are amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with our audience. Thank you for the wisdom you have and the work you do. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I love the compliments too, Tracy. That's why I keep coming back. That's great.
Oh, good. Okay, then I'll keep them coming.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you again, Brent. And thank you guys in the audience. If you enjoyed this episode, like it and share it so every other farmer out there can benefit from this great episode. Thank you guys, and see you on next week's episode. Bye.
You silence the doubters. You get the best tools. You work with the right people. You look to the future and bust through.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.